Welcome, everybody. Welcome. I hope you guys are having an amazing day. This is going to be a really quick live. This is day 2 of our shadow work, our deep shadow work series that I'm doing. And I was so excited to do this video all day. So I have a lot that I want to talk about, but I'm going to try to make it as short as possible so we don't spend 3 hours here as usual, which I love to do with you guys. But yeah, really want to share this with you. So let's talk about shadow work. You're doing your shadow work and you're just identifying what are the things that really cause these major blockages in your life. And right when you find what it is, you begin to excavate down to the root, you find the root, and you begin to change this pattern. And what happens? It's okay for a day, maybe while you're at your retreat or while you're doing the work, everything is fine. And then you go back to the office or you go back home to connect with your family, or you're back with your partner, and all of a sudden you are triggered once again by something that they say or do, and we fall right back into the loop of the reaction that we previously were working on. And so, oh, hold on a second. Yeah, okay, make sure you guys can hear me. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, and so you fall right back into the loop in which you are repeating over and over again this pattern that you cannot seem to break. Okay, so let's talk about that. What is happening to us, and how do we finally begin to shift that, okay, for good? Now, one of the reasons why we keep repeating these things is that we are biochemically, there is a reward system in our body that rewards our reactions, right? And so we get so addicted to certain behaviors, and we're not only addicted to the behavioral, the act of what we're doing, but it's a biochemical process that is really deep inside the body. And so this becomes something that we seek out in the same way that when you're addicted to sugar, you seek out sugar and desserts and, sweet juices and all kinds of things to satiate that need for that sweetness. In the same way that, you are a drug addict and are, going after drugs, or an alcoholic or a gambler. All of those addictions, any and all addictions, are the pursuit of a biochemical charge that is running in your body. And so we literally become addicted to that. Okay. So, one of the biggest misconceptions with shadow work that people think, oh, you're just going to, realize what it is and change it overnight. We actually revert right back to these same patterns because we're addicted to the biochemistry of these experiences. And we don't only pursue, so you think you're addicted to sugar, you pursue sweetness. You don't just pursue pleasurable experiences. With this biochemical addiction, you're actually pursuing the chemistry. And so it can be a horrible experience. It can be stress. It could be the adrenaline, right? And so many other chemicals that we're actually pursuing without realizing the incredible effect that it has on your body. And when you live in a constant state of stress and a constant state of anxiety, which is the result of this pursuit of a biochemical hit, this is where we end up getting completely devastated in the body, right? The body begins to oxidate more. I mean, I'm going to walk you through the whole process right now, the biochemistry of it, because I'm excited to share that with you. But essentially, we become so severely addicted to these reactions, these experiences, that they are absolutely very difficult to break. And so, my invitation is that in DNA reprogramming, for those of you that have worked with me, what we focus on is, number one, first identifying what is that pattern. And you can identify what that repeated biochemical response is by beginning to understand what part, finding what point do you keep coming back to? What are you seeking through the reaction? What are you pursuing through this relationship, through this habit, through, any of these behaviors that we seem to pursue something? Now, inherently, you are not your body. Okay, this is the most important takeaway from everything that I'm going to dive into in a minute, is that your soul is it's an infinite source. It is an infinite potential. And that infinite potential can't, we block its full emanation, its full expression through the physical body. And when we are in these survival mechanisms where we are solely, completely connected to the biochemistry of the experiential world, it is very difficult to allow the soul to come in, because the soul, the higher self, the soul is always there. It's an intrinsic part of every cell in your body. Okay. But to allow it to emerge, to allow it to play a part in the creation of your experiences, requires you to change the chemistry of your body entirely. Okay. From the inside out, which means the chemistry of the soul, because in order for the soul to inhabit the body, we do have to shift the chemistry that is being occupied by the body. It's actually embodying a neutral point, the observer, and the soul, the essence of yourself, is the one that isn't judgmental of the external experience, that isn't trying to manipulate, trying to control, trying to feel any certain way, that doesn't require safety or assurance for its existence, or for any of the plethora of human expression that it might have. Okay. Because the soul, again, it's not the body, it's not the identity, it's not the self, it is an infinite being. And so our job, our invitation is for us to remember that you are that soul, so that you can transcend this chemical addiction that we have to the physical matter. This is very much a materialistic aspect of being human. Okay. So when we talk about being materialistic, we're not just talking about being addicted to material things, to the feeling and sensation body, right? Because the distinction that the human has as it incarnates into the physical body is that the soul of the human gets to experience everything through its senses. Okay, so in other dimensions, we are not manifested fully into the physical body. We are etheric beings. We are less physical. We are actually energy, pure light, whatever the manifestation is. There's infinite kinds of manifestations. And the laws of those dimensions are completely different than this one. In this current dimension, we are here to experience physicality through the senses, right? The only reason we can feel anything, both emotionally, right? What are we seeing? Through perceptually, whatever we perceive, which directly affects the body biochemically. Whether it's a good thing, bad thing, neutral thing, the body is responding. Okay. And so there's an entire reorganization of the body that takes place when we allow the body to come into its 0 point, when we allow ourselves to discard of the identification of the character, the personality, the mask. We talked about masks in our first video. When we discard that mask, underneath that is this infinite essence that is accessible to you. And that infinite essence, it is just occupying this physical body in the for a means to an end, which is to purely experience all the potential of this realm, without identifying to any one experience or any one feeling. The thing that happens with trauma, the thing that happens with severe pain, severe emotional situations, is that we create the mask, which then is the personality as a result of whatever happened to us, whether in your childhood or more recently. And then we form a complete attachment identification to this mask, to this role that we have now assigned ourselves in order to better survive whatever we're experiencing. And so underneath that mask, the removal of that mask would then reveal the essence, okay, which is untouched. Okay, your essence is untouched by trauma, it's untouched by pain, whether it's physical, emotional, sexual. We had a lot of questions yesterday about abuse, right? And so this video is definitely for those of you that have been in severe abusive circumstances or of any kind, mental, emotional, physical, financial, I mean, you name it, because it is about anything that triggers any part of you is a biochemical response. Okay. And so today we're going to talk about the spirituality of this biochemical addiction to experience. And so to transcend that, part of DNA reprogramming is that when we identify the traumatic emotion, the root of the traumatic emotion, we then identify the opposite of that, right? So the complementary emotion to that. And so the opposite of that, let's say the root is the fear, and the opposite of that would be safety. Okay. You then train your body to feel safety by learning how to feel safe in your body. And again, that neural pathway that is built by reinforcing biochemically the feeling of safety in your body is how you rewire your entire system to then respond differently to experiences. So, full circle in healing trauma, healing anything, and to learn how to disidentify with the chemical addiction that we have to the many identities that you might be holding on to as a survival mechanism is to teach the body an alternative way of experiencing whatever they're experiencing. Okay. And we're not talking about gaslighting yourself and saying that you didn't feel something you felt. In fact, absolutely feeling fully what you're feeling. Because one of the things that causes addiction from a somatic, psycho-spiritual perspective is that you become addicted to the resistant to feeling fully something, acknowledging fully something. And that resistance is what becomes an addiction, because part of the survival, because we're in survival, we subconsciously believe we will die if we feel the pain, the amount of pain, or acknowledge the totality of the pain that you have caused yourself or others or experienced as a result of something. Okay. And so, our brains are wired for survival. Biochemically, the entire body is completely wired for survival. So anytime that it detects any threat of any kind to any part of itself, physical and mental, it's going to trigger those responses. Okay. And so to fix those responses, to fix the responses in a way that is really coming into a state of coherence. Okay. Because again, as I mentioned, to hijack this addiction that we have in a way, it's not a matter of neglecting your emotions, but to feel fully, because every single emotion is a restructuring of your energetic field. It's a restructuring of biochemistry. It's a restructuring of geometry. Okay, there's a profound connection between geometry and biochemistry, because at the platonic level, chemistry in itself, every molecule that is produced through this chemical compositions are geometric crystals that you are using in your body. Okay, and so every chemical reaction that you have has this crystal component to it biochemically, and your body, if it's used to having a certain crystalline structure in your body, it's very hard to move beyond that. Okay, because again, you're an entire being full of water and your energy, and you are quite less matter than you are water and energy, this bioelectrical system in your body. And so to produce the biochemistry in your body, the bioelectrical response, in order to become more conductive, right? Because the more you hold this crystalline system of these negative chemistry in your body, the less conductive you are. You're actually centrifugal, right? Which is the depletion of your life force. And the depletion of the life force is both biochemical, it's bioelectrical, it is energetic, etheric in the body. And etheric is deeply connected to the mind because every thought is manifesting in the redistribution of energy in your body, right? Because if your thoughts are attached to one focus, then all of your cells are communicating with that energetically. Okay. And so when I say that, it's not like, the energy is being drained out of the cells of your body in one direction. You can do that. This is known to be true for people that have like very, very severe traumas, right? And they can't forgive or they can't let go of the trauma. They just keep repeating that trauma over and over again because quantum non-locality, in the same way that we are entangled with other universes and other systems of consciousness, you're also entangled with your physical experiences, right? So you need to learn how to work through those charges. Those are bioelectrical charges that are memorized in the body, in the fascia, in this crystalline structure of biochemistry, as well as in the etheric field, right? So when the body is not moving in a toroidal energy system, it's contractive or it's broken or it has holes, whatever the body is however the body is responding in a way that is centrifugal. Okay, so yeah, I am going to go ahead and share my screen with you. Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. It's so great to see you guys. Charles Pono, Woo Rider, so great to see you. Grandizer, Flubber, Grandizer, so great to see you. Let me, and everybody else, I can't see all the chat. So if you guys are there, just if you have questions, ask your questions in capital letters. Listen, I spent hours doing this presentation because I actually did a similar presentation in my emotional mastery class and years ago, which is great. But I really went deeper in this presentation because we want to talk really deep about the chemistry of it. And I was able to organize my thoughts a lot easier this time than in the past. So I'm really going to go into, I mean, this is a 20-page presentation, but I'm not going to spend the whole time on that. I'm just going to move through this. Now, I am in the process of building a portal for you guys to access each of the 30 replays of this video that you can access on my website, including all of the slides and all of the research and documentation that you can go deep dive into it as much as you want. So in the meantime, this is a really beautiful presentation, and I'm going to share some of the slides with you so that we can understand the biochemical aspect, okay? All right. So, as I was saying, your brain is designed for survival, okay? And it's biochemically designed, not your soul. Let me just be clear. It's for you to have a nice understanding. Your soul does not exist in survival, okay? It is above that system because it is knowing itself as the whole. Okay, let's talk about homeostasis because the soul is the complete model of harmonic order, okay, not only in this dimensional plane, but in all dimensional planes, it really becomes the most intelligent, advanced system of survival beyond the human survival system, okay? So our human body has an innate survival mechanism. That mechanism is only designed to keep this physical body alive. Okay. And when I say alive, it's like those vitals keep running. Okay. So, um, on its own. Okay. It really isn't until we unify the soul and integrate the higher self into the physical body that the physical body can operate on its most optimum, highest function. Okay. And so that's the thing, because as soon as we separate the soul from the physical body, this is why we have years and years of the pharmaceutical industry taking over the priority of of humanity, humanity's focus, right? And so not only is our food now owned by chemical companies, but now big tech is also part of that. And alongside of that is the geneticists, which are at the core of all of these systems that are working with your genetics, right? They're working with the genetics, the manipulation of the genetics, suppression of genetics, in order to maintain certain things, right? And so this is why, like, the human's greatest, the most powerful way to remove a human out of a state of control is to let them have absolute sovereignty over their physical body. And another element is that in medicine, we are surviving centuries of being completely oblivious to the complexities of the feminine body, right? Because we haven't studied that. I mean, even entire medical degrees are not educated on the complexities of the feminine body. Blood testing, vitals, like you name it, the entire medical system. And this is not something that's hidden. This is something that is really coming to surface now, which I find completely incredible, just surprising, right? So that is a representation of how the feminine represents the divine. The feminine represents the connection to the source, right? The feminine represents that divine creative potential because she is the womb of life. And so everything having to do with the womb, everything having to do with the feminine has been suppressed, hidden from mainstream in order to control. Because as long as you keep people thinking that in order to create, you have to survive, you keep everyone in a masculine model of existence. Okay, so that being said, to be able to experience homeostasis, true homeostasis on both a spiritual and biological level, we would have to balance these two energies, the feminine and the masculine. Okay, so from a biochemical, organic perspective, I'm going to talk about homeostasis versus allostasis. Homeostasis maintains the fixed internal equilibrium. Allostasis achieves stability through change. Okay. The allostatic model explains how the organism continuously recalibrates its baseline in response to cumulative stressors, with chronic allostatic load leading to systemic dysregulation. Okay. So remember, I was just mentioning that we become addicted to certain emotional states, certain responses. And when we talk about chronic, we're talking about this consistent repetition of the need for a certain feeling, emotion, or mental state. Okay. And so the addiction of yourself, so why you can't break the pattern, why you can't transcend. And I'm going to go deeper into this because I'm not just talking about you in your life and what happened in the past 5 years or maybe 5 hours ago. I'm talking about the generations of trauma, of the repeated pattern that you experienced today, this morning, is being repeated for generations and generations in your DNA. Okay. And so these chronic states of dysregulation, systemic dysregulation, is something that is passed down through generations. Okay. And this is when you talk on a spiritual level about how to create homeostasis in the body, we're talking about learning to regulate and to bring the body out of these survival mechanisms back into a harmonic order. Okay. Again, your harmonic order is an innate part of you. It's the deprogramming of the programs in order to embody that state. Okay. So, acute versus chronic stress. Acute stress is adaptive. It sharpens attention, mobilizes energy, and promotes survival. Okay, examples of acute stress: a car accident, right? Something terrible happens, a severe disaster that is happening. Um, and the thing is that some people live in this state. Okay, some people that have been through very traumatic experiences. It could be a fire when you were a child. It could be, an earthquake, like the people in Venezuela, for example, are dealing with these major earthquakes in Japan. It's like acute levels of stress. Your home is gone, loved ones are gone, and that creates a massive impact in the body biochemically. Okay. Chronic stress however, produces persistent HPA axis activation, systemic inflammation, and structural brain changes that impair the very prefrontal functions needed to downregulate the response. Okay. So this prefrontal cortex is a part that is regulating, it's in charge for regulating the body. It becomes completely dysregulated. Okay. And for those of you that have been part of my out of body experience classes, you'll know that if we have this part of the brain completely affected, it is part of the storage of short-term memory, but also etherically affects the way you move in and out of body. Okay. Um, yeah, so let's move on. Because I want to get to these main points. Okay, so let's talk about universal survival networks. Okay, what do we mean by that? Let's talk about the impact of survival. It's not just, everyday surviving to not die, right? So we also experience that etherically, mentally, emotional, and it's affected through all of the five senses. Okay, so all your five senses are employed in your survival. And so, however, the access to those senses is absolutely interrupted and limited when you're in this acute state of stress. Okay, and if you're in chronic stress, you are repeating these patterns over and over again. Of course, you're not going to have, good hearing. Of course, you're not going to have your, certain taste issues, or parts of your body are not functioning correctly, because chronic stress causes an inhibition in your immune system. Okay. And your immune system is also an etheric system. Okay, so energetically, your immune system becomes affected because all your systems are interconnected. It's also your ability to access your intuitive self. You can't access that because in order to access the intuitive self, your senses have to be open. The meridians in the body have to be connected, right? You have to come into this centripetal, toroidal flow of life force. Okay, so we're talking about on a autonomic, sorry, I can't speak right now. Nervous system, your endocrine system, which is your chakra system. Oops, sorry. Um, hello. Um, your hormonal cascades, HPA, HPG axes are in the endocrine system. Please understand how important that is, okay? Because your hormonal changes, your ability to work and balance and from a balanced hormonal state is really huge. I mean, it drives your testosterone, it drives, all your creative juices, all your energy, the vitality in your body. And for women, of course, this is a cyclical thing, a 30-day cyclical thing, right? It's a monthly thing. Both men and women are operating at different clocks. And, the earth as well has its own natural clock. And so when our body comes into harmonic order, we're kind of aligning more to these natural larger systems of harmonic order. Okay. Um, More on that later. But the immune system is also essentially completely disconnected. That's part of your survival, right? So internally, when there's an accident and you're bleeding or you're about to lose a leg or infection, your immune system comes on overdrive to come and support you, right? Your cardiovascular system, your heart rate and your blood pressure, which is one of the leading parts that is affected when we don't know how to have a healthy heart chakra, healthy heart center. And your enteric nervous system, which is your gut brain dialogue, which is super important to your emotions, your habits, extremely connected to survival mechanisms, okay? Because biochemically, the food that we eat either satiates or alters the chemistry in your body. Okay, so there's a major dialogue with that, which is why we have obesity and, a lot of dysregulation in the body, in our weight and heat and being able to hold a homeostasis in the body. Okay, your fascia and connective tissue, which is incredibly important because that's your somatic memory. Okay. All of the memories of your emotional experiences are recorded in the fascia, and they're directly connected to the tension that you hold in the body. So if you're constantly contracting your body, okay, there's very little flow. And so those of you that have been in very traumatic experiences, you might experience the contraction of your belly like all the time, and then finally you go to a meditation group and you realize, oh my gosh, I don't know why I was so tense all the time. Of course, you're going to end up with severe diseases and problems in the body, right? So yeah, then we go into the bioelectrical communication, which is directly connected to your cellular voltage and signaling. Okay, this is when we start to get into the quantum field of the body, where we are coming into the bioelectrical system of vitality in the body. Okay, so every cell of your body is intercommunicating, deeply connected to your fascia and connected to tissue. Okay, so both etheric memory and physical memory are communicating through this bioelectrical system. My microbiome, right? The brain axis, gut bacteria modulates mood and immunity, as we were discussing here, these different immune systems. And then your central nervous system, which is your brain, your spinal cord, and the general command center of the body, because it's the nervous system that signals the responses of the body, which then create biochemical responses. That's why we focus so much on learning the regulation of the nervous system in order to embody the 0 point. And really, you can't control any of these systems if you cannot control the nervous system, basically. Okay, so the nervous system is deeply connected to all of those. So let's talk about, when an emotion is actually becoming a biology, okay, a biological response. Okay, so first of all, and this is really important for you in your spiritual journey, because if you don't understand this process, sometimes you skip emotional healing, emotional attention, and alchemization, and integration. Okay, so in all of these aspects, we have to kind of reverse our process when we're healing trauma spiritually. Okay, so we start with sensory perception, the raw environment data that enters through the sensory organs. Your sensory perception is the first system that receives signals. Okay. And you'll see that we're going to come back to the sensory perception, because in order to heal trauma and alchemize it, we have to come back to the sensory perception. The sensory perception is where the root lies. Okay, so when we're working in DNA reprogramming or hypnotherapy, trying to find the root of a trauma, this is why I walk you through the emotions and the layers of the emotions. But we'll get there, because at the base of that is a feeling, it's a sensation, and then it's your perception that was created as a result of that sensation. Now, once we process the senses, we come into meaning making, right? We apply a meaning to what we just experienced through the senses. Now, when we have a traumatic experience and we don't have a record in the library of experiences, this is an unknown situation, we apply meaning to it. And that meaning that we apply can be very detrimental to the self, to the ego, and to the identity. Or it could be very constructive. Okay, so in healing, we are changing the destructive perception, the meaning that we applied, to expand that perception into a perception that is more conductive and actually more true. Because what happens in trauma is that the meaning that we apply to this sensory feeling is very limited. It's only coming from the limitations of what you knew in that moment, right? And so, whether you're the abuser or the victim, let's say in an experience, both parties are coming from what tools they have available to them and they're willing to utilize at that time. Okay. So, once we apply meaning, we create an emotional interpretation. Okay, so this emotional interpretation, interoceptive signals are integrated with cognitive appraisal to produce felt emotional responses. Okay, so a construction, not a readout. So emotional interpretation is the key to alchemical transmutation. Okay, without this deep understanding of your emotional interpretation, that's why people that say, "Oh, you don't need to go back to your trauma, your childhood trauma," I could not disagree more, because you are an interconnected system. And those life experiences are extremely valuable in you knowing yourself. You're not going to know why you have these repetitive patterns, these addictions to emotions and responses, addictions to desires to be validated constantly, if you don't know that in your childhood that was missing from you. You won't, and simply knowing that it was missing from you, you need to understand how was that played out for you? Because in that is what you're constantly seeking. Okay, so let's say father abandoned, right? There was no father. And so you have this constant feeling of being abandoned, fear of abandoned, fear of attachment, fear of intimacy, fear of creation and manifestation of your actions, taking actions in your life that can feel safe and secure and stable, so on and on. Um, those are this is where we have to apply the alchemy, because the alchemy is not just a fictional or etheric state of thought. Okay, it becomes an etheric state of thought once you link the biology and the body, and that's what creates true transformational healing. Okay, physiologically speaking of, it creates hormonal and neural cascades, mobilizing the body heart rate, muscle tension, respiration, and immune function, which are all shifting. And finally, memory formation. Okay, because this memory formation is the crystallization of an experience. It's that reference point in your field that is suspended in time in this in the quantum system of time, which is nonlinear. It's a spherical model of experiences, bioelectrical charges that are maintained within the morphogenetic field, right? And so in the morphogenetic field has many layers to it. The more close to the body, integrated in the body, the more we're really sustaining that pattern. And the further away from the body you find these memories, the more ancestral and subconscious they have become, more suppressed. Okay. So again, this is basically charting out how we do the process of DNA reprogramming. Okay. We are essentially going from senses down to the emotions, down to the body, and then to the memory. And when we get to the memory, we want to unlock the emotions, expand the range of frequency of emotions, go to the senses, expand the range of frequency to the senses. Why? Because in sensory perception is your intuition. It is your higher faculties, your ability to access the higher self, which we have blocked out through conditioning. Here is the path of that conditioning. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you already know this, but just a quick, super fast overview of this. Um, the emotional brain, the key structures of the brain are the amygdala, hippocampus, prefrontal cortex, and anterior cingulate. Okay. Amygdala is really interesting because this is the threat signal. Okay. It processes fear, encodes emotional memories, and initiates the stress cascade before conscious awareness occurs. This is the hyperactivated in chronic stress and PTSD. Okay. So this is the reptilian brain. This is what we really want to be working with because this is where you see how it encodes emotional memories. This is basically your ancestral DNA. Okay, this connects to ancestral DNA, to all of the history of this ancestral trauma that we have stored within the body. It's also the access point, the portal into that library of information, which we call the Akashic records. Okay, so when we have an extremely dysregulated amygdala, it's very difficult to access those aspects of ourselves. And this also connects really deeply to the creation of natural DMT in the body. A lot of times people that have a very dysregulated amygdala abuse these substances like ayahuasca, DMT, in order to reach those, levels of understanding because they can't reach it naturally because there is damage or there is an overexhaustion of these parts of our brain. Biochemically, what, these create, we'll talk about in a second, but we are addicted to that. So you can get an idea of the kind of hormones and chemicals that you're mostly running on by understanding a little bit about this. And it's not black and white, okay? Because all these systems are working interconnectedly. The brain is super, super complex. The hippocampus is contextualizes memory in time and space, highly vulnerable to cortisol mediated damage. Chronic stress causes measurable hippocampal volume reduction. Okay, so this is scientifically documented extensively that when we are under chronic states of stress, our brain literally it shrinks down. Okay. And so that's a really big deal because there's something to say about the waters of the body. Okay, so when the brain shrinks down, it's like the dehydration of this part of your entire body. So when we are in stress, we're not taking care of the body, we're not hydrating, we are accessing less and less of our biochemistry, which then produces bioelectricity in the body. And so a body that can't access bioelectricity by going into nature, for example, and aligning with these natural energy systems that are replenishing the body, right? The positive and negative charges of the body. We have a lot of dysfunction within these spaces, chronic stress, right? Is affecting this part of the brain. Prefrontal cortex executes regulation, decision making, and emotional modulation, the last structure to mature developmentally and the first to go offline under acute stress. Okay. The anterior cingulate integrates emotional and cognitive processing, involved in pain perception, error detection, and the regulation of autonomic responses. The insula, it's the seat of interoception, maps the body's internal state into conscious awareness, center of self-awareness, empathy, and the felt sense of emotion. So these are like literally the entryway into the spiritual anatomy of your body. Okay. When we're mostly operating from the amygdala, it's really hard to implement this insula, right? Or this function of ourselves. Okay. Um, yeah. Let's continue. Every emotion is a chemical symphony. And I love to use this term because I've spoken very much about how each of you has a vibrational signature, which is a frequency that produces a certain sound. So every single one of you that has a creative color, that vibrational frequency, that color is a vibrational frequency, which also produces a sound. And the color that you have in your crown chakra is basically where is the highest octave for your spiritual evolution at this time based on your vibrational frequency. Okay. And we'll talk more about that some other time, but it's really important for you to understand that. And you can work with energy frequency. That's why frequency medicine is so fantastic for the body. Okay. Now, really quickly, we'll talk about the neurochemical architecture of emotion. A dopamine and reward. Dopamine encodes reward, prediction, motivation, and novelty. Okay. So as I read these, I want you to kind of tune into this because just recognize and say, oh, this is something that's me. This is what I'm constantly doing. Just those of you that are deep in your shadow work will know what are some of the repetitive patterns and the things that you pursue in your psychologically. Okay, so this is the chemical perspective of these psychological behaviors. Okay, it is released in anticipation of reward, not only its receipt, making it the primary driver of craving, habit formation, and emotional addiction loops. Noradrenaline modulates alertness, arousal, and the consolidation of emotionally significant memories. This is the one that we are very addicted to in trauma. Okay. Serotonin and oxytocin. Serotonin regulates mood, social hierarchy, impulses control, and gut mobility. Oxytocin, the bonding, neuropeptides foster trust, attachment, pro-social behavior, but is also released during trauma bonding and intermittent reinforcement cycles, complicating its role in relational addiction, right? So this is what we pursue in those toxic relationships. Somebody was talking about how do we heal from these toxic relationships? We need to become aware of the biochemical response, which is the release of oxytocin when we are experiencing this bonding with something, this attachment, trust. Okay. And so we form attachment and trust to many different parts of ourselves, internally, externally. We are addicted to certain things. And again, all of these things are functioning from the mask, the personality, not the soul. Okay. Cortisol and adrenaline. Cortisol, the master stress hormone, mobilizes glucose, suppresses inflammation acutely, and alters brain architecture chronically. Adrenaline is producing the immediate fight flight surge, increased heart rate, vasodilation in muscles, and the acute focusing of attention on the perceived threat. GABA, glutamate, and endorphins. GABA is the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter, the brake pedal of the brain. Glutamate drives excitatory signaling and synaptic plasticity. And endorphins produce analgesia and euphoria under stress. Okay, so analgesia is like the numbing, like an analgesic. The endocannabinoids, which modulate mood, pain, and the excitation of traumatic memories via CB1 receptors. Okay. So let's talk about the hormonal integration. This is really deep into the science. I'm going to actually let you guys study this on your own because it goes really deep into the science of this. But just one quick thing about this that I want to share with you while on this live is that when we talk about the biochemical release, you have to understand that it's also the suppression or the expansion of hormonal responses. Okay, so the hormonal system being your creation system. These are your creative juices. If your hormones are out of balance, you're either completely depleted or you're super hyperactive. Either way, you don't come into regulation. You can't regulate your creation. Okay. And we're talking about source creation. Okay. So there's different levels of creation. The human creates through everything, its thoughts, its vision, its literally we're creating our reality through our vision. Okay, through literally we're creating our reality through the words that we speak, the emotions that we feel. Okay, the sex and the creation of actual life. So all of these are very deeply interconnected. Thyroid, sex hormones, and melatonin. Chronic stress suppresses the HPT axis, which reduces thyroid output and contributing to the metabolic slowdown. It contributes to depression, cognitive fog. Sex hormones like estrogen, testosterone, progesterone are also depleted. The body prioritizes cortisol synthesis over sex steroid production. Okay. Melatonin dysregulation disrupts circadian rhythm and immune surveillance. This is so important because many of you have heard me talk about the sexual organs being connected to the throat, being connecting to the pineal gland. This is one interconnected runway of creation, and it's deeply affected when we are in states of stress. Okay, you literally can't create, and these are the main energy systems of pure creation. So let's talk about how does an emotion go into addiction. First of all, number one, we go to perception, then interpretation, a stress response, hormonal release, neurochemical reward, then the behavior. And then we feel relief. Then it turns into a memory, which then creates our identity, which then creates a future craving back to this neurochemical reward. Okay. And vice versa, our behavior now seeks neurochemical reward, which creates hormonal release, which creates a stress response, which creates the meaning that we apply, affecting our perception. Okay. So again, this entire cycle is operating by a human that is not conscious, not in the present moment. Notice we talk about memories of the past, future cravings of the future. This individual is constantly existing in the ping pong dance between the future and the past. But the present is alchemizing all of this system. Because in the present, if you continuously come back to the present moment, you literally cannot continue this cycle of interpretation of your experiences over and over again. Okay? So we want to break this habit by being conscious of our perception, expanding our range of perception, shifting the interpretation, and releasing the identity to it. Okay? And to close that cycle is to change the neurochemical reward. Instead of the neurochemical reward being a stressful experience like anger, stress, anxiety, fear, making it love, peace, acceptance, self-validation, which produces more sustaining chemicals in the body, sustaining reward system. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, I would love to go through every single one, but I have to get off soon right now. But let's go really quickly into the reward system. This is survive, flight, response. So this is really important. Let me actually just a little bigger for us. So one of the things that is really hard to break in these processes are the pretty severe meanings that we apply to these emotions. Okay, so for example, shame and guilt, when it's chronically activated in childhood, it becomes nervous system baseline for home. Okay. Um, Sorry, guys. I gotta fix this. Anger, right? It activates the adrenaline, and dopamine produces a surge of power and certainty in otherwise uncertain world. We become completely addicted to power, for example. Okay. The addiction to anxiety creates hypervigilance. It becomes identity. The mind mistakes the feeling of scanning for danger constantly with being responsible and prepared. Okay. So just notice right there is an entire storyline that we have built about how important it is to be in a constant state of hypervigilance. This is a completely destructive emotion that completely takes you out of your homeostasis. And another major role is the victim and the rescue identity, okay, hand in hand. These relational roles that consistently generate specific neurochemical responses. These profiles become embedded in self concept that are unconsciously reenacted. Okay, so you end up always wanting to be in a constant state of victimization or rescuing someone, right? And so somebody was asking about toxic abusive relationships. This would be the trigger that, again, I talk about resonance between the abuser and the victim. The resonance is the core root program and belief. And so again, these are archetypal roles. And when we are talking about the shadow work, these are exactly what we want to break in those processes. We want to alchemize them, revert them from these constant pursuits of these main emotional systems. Okay. Hey, and as you know, going into the epigenetics, we absolutely change whether we come into a high level of um, production of vitality, proper function in the DNA is completely interrupted by constant states of stress and dysregulation. Okay. When our memory is state dependent, memories are most accessible when organisms at the same time physiological and neurochemical state in which they are in which they were encoded. This is why body-based triggers can retrieve memories that verbal cues cannot, and why healing must engage the same somatic states in which trauma was registered. Okay, so that's why EMDR is essential, right? And so DNA reprogramming is utilizing the same process of EMDR, coming into a light hypnagogic state in order to access this rapid eye movement where you go back to those memories, you desensitize, and you transmute that emotional trauma. Okay. Somatic encoding, the body encodes experience through changes in muscle tone, facial tension, visceral activation, autonomic set points, and hormonal baseline. These somatic memories exist in parallel with and often independent of declarative narrative memories. Memory reconsolidation. Every time a memory is retrieved, it enters a label state before being restored or reconsolidated. This reconstruction window represents the brain's neural mechanism for memory updating and the neurobiological basis for effective trauma therapies that induce new emotional information during memory reactivation. So when I'm focusing on DNA reprogramming, that's why it's absolutely essential for you to feel and become familiar with the alternate emotion, the positive emotion that is going to alchemize the negative one. Okay. So super, super important. But all of this essentially, most important, creates mitochondrial energy regulation. Okay. It's mitochondria, it's not just energy factories. these are critical stress centers. And that's why whenever we have long sustained chronic stress, the body absolutely develops severe illnesses and imbalances. Okay. All right, guys. This goes into intergenerational trauma. And I talk a lot about this on this channel, but essentially, we are passing down generational trauma from our parents, our mother, our ancestors. We keep repeating some of these emotional lineages. And so the information that you are receiving through everyday traumas and stressors and triggers is linking directly to these memories in your field, to these past lives. Okay. Remember that your past lives are your gateway to your ancestors. Okay. So you were your mother in, you were the mother in your mother-daughter dynamic in another lifetime. Okay, so you are repeating these ancestral programs. Um, Emotional lineages, it's what we're inheriting from our ancestors. And so some of the main categories of that, which we pass down, are fear and hypervigilance, shame and abandonment, which is a really huge one. This is something we pass down generation through generation. Scarcity and perfectionism, that's a really big one. Emotional suppression, right? So suppressing the emotions, and addiction and relational dynamics. All of these have archetypal outcomes. Okay. They are all let out by archetypal roles, whether it's the abuser or the victim or the mother, or the daughter, the healer, the wounded healer. They all are at the root of these archetypal roles that we play as a human race. And in order to move through the 12 zodiac signs, which is what you are all doing in your spiritual evolution, we are learning how to alchemize, integrate, and rebalance all of these imbalanced archetypal aspects of ourselves until we remember that we are whole, and we can alchemize each of these categories in our ancestral lineage by no longer repeating in the present moment these patterns, okay, which are very destructive. And so you can learn more about family systems from a psychological perspective here in the slides when you access them, okay? So, majority of the trauma that we're experiencing, the whole point is that we are in pursuit of love. This is really what we are after as a soul. And when I say love, I'm not talking about love as the emotion. I'm talking about as love as the infinite potential, the whole, the unity field, the unified field that you are, which is a neutral state, but it's also it's an orgasmic state of bliss, but not in a physical, a whole physical sense. Sorry, what I mean by that, it's a whole system orgasm to feel that unity consciousness. And those of you that had near-death experiences or contact experiences where you were led to experience that know exactly what that feels like. And it's not something that we can experience very freely here on Earth. It's something that we need to access. And that access is an intrinsic knowing. It's something that we remember when we are in the womb and when we are born. Okay. And so we need to learn that the majority of the traumatic experiences that we have is the pursuit of sometimes these intense orgasmic states, which we pursue subconsciously. Men, men and women pursuing it either through sex, through relationships, through parental dynamics, right? With our children, we hope to feel this bliss state of love with them. And so this is the root of the majority of, suffering. So really, I want you to take some time and kind of learn about this, because when the nervous system confuses intensity for intimacy in that pursuit, we end up in trouble. Okay. We're going from chaos turns into intimacy, suffering and devotion, which is the alchemical side of that. Rescuing equals love. familiarity equals belonging. We confuse these systems and the nervous system confuses them. So it's important for you to correct this inversion of natural order, which is part of our job as we come into this collective harmonic order. And one of the most incredible things that you'll realize is that this entire world is actually based on all of these inversions of truth. Okay. And you'll be able to really experience that and see that. Okay. I mean, basically, we are addicted to a lot of these elements. And even in the spiritual community, you can get really stuck in some of these things. Okay. All right, guys. So that brings me to the end of our presentation. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. It was an honor. There's so much to this presentation that I'm gonna enjoy hearing your feedback. Again, I'm gonna publish this new website page where I'm gonna have all these clickable replays available to you. But of course, if you want to access it through my YouTube channel, you can go ahead and just subscribe or, follow it along here as well. Okay. I want to thank you so much for joining me. And let me go ahead and see if uh, the chat really quick. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. It was such an honor to connect with you guys. And yeah, I'll be really happy to answer your questions. Please put your questions in capital letters. I don't see any questions here, but if you have questions, put them down below and I will answer them in our next video. Have an amazing day and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.